Tom Reed stood at the entrance of the Galactic Science Academy, his heart beating fast as he watched alien students of all shapes and sizes walk past him. Some floated, others crawled, and a few even rolled. He clutched his acceptance letter tightly, still finding it hard to believe he was the first human ever chosen for their exchange program. The academy building looked like something from a dream. Its crystal towers stretched up into the purple sky of planet Meridian, their surfaces shifting colors with each passing cloud. Tom took a deep breath, adjusted his environmental suit's settings, and walked through the main entrance. Species identification, human. Classification, carbon-based. Threat level, minimal. The building's AI announced as he passed through the security scanner. A few nearby alien students turned to look at him, their eyes, stalks, and sensors focusing on the strange two-armed creature walking among them. "Welcome, Tom Reed," a calm voice said. Tom turned to see a tall, blue-skinned being floating slightly above the ground. "I am Professor Blue, head of the Xenobiology department. We've been expecting you." The professor's body glowed softly as it spoke, a trait Tom remembered reading about in his orientation materials. He tried not to stare, but it was hard not to notice how the light pulsed in rhythm with the professor's words. "Thank you for accepting me into the program," Tom said, keeping his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I hope I can prove that humans have something to offer the galactic scientific community." Professor Blue's glow flickered in what Tom guessed was amusement. "That remains to be seen. Your species is quite young, and your methods traditional. But the board was intrigued by your application, particularly your work in solving complex problems with limited resources." They floated down a hallway where machines that looked impossibly advanced lined the walls. Tom saw equations floating in midair, holograms of DNA strands from 1,000 worlds spinning in complex patterns, and devices that seemed to bend reality itself. "Your first assignment will be in my personal laboratory," Professor Blue continued. "You'll be working with Ray, one of our most promising students. Ray comes from the Andromeda Galaxy and has an excellent understanding of our latest quantum computing methods." They entered a large room filled with even more amazing equipment. A tall, slender being with silvery skin and 4 arms was working at one of the stations. Ray looked up as they entered, their metallic features shifting into what might have been a frown. "Professor, the new calculations still show no progress," Ray said, ignoring Tom completely. "The protein folding sequences refuse to align according to our predictions. Perhaps our new human colleague might offer a fresh perspective," Professor Blue suggested, motioning Tom forward. "Sometimes a different viewpoint can be illuminating." Ray's expression shifted again, this time clearly showing doubt. "With respect, Professor, this is highly advanced work. The calculations alone require quantum processing beyond what human computers can achieve in a century." Tom felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice calm. "Maybe that's why you need someone who had to solve problems without quantum computers," he said. "Sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones." The room grew quiet. Several other alien students working nearby stopped what they were doing to watch. Professor Blue's glow brightened slightly. "Well said," the professor remarked. "You'll start tomorrow morning. Ray will show you the project details and get you set up with lab access." With that, Professor Blue floated away, leaving Tom and Ray staring at each other. "I'll try not to slow you down too much," Tom said with a small smile. Ray's metallic features softened slightly. "We shall see. The last 3 research teams failed to make any progress. If you can help, I don't care if you're human, Andromean, or a space rock." They gestured to a workstation. "Let me show you what we're dealing with." As Tom followed Ray to the station, he couldn't help but feel both excited and nervous. He had dreamed of studying alien science his whole life, but now that he was here, the challenge seemed enormous. Still, he remembered what his old professor on Earth had told him. The best scientists don't just know the answers, they know how to ask the right questions. Tomorrow, he would start asking those questions. For now, he had a lot to learn about his new lab, his new partner, and the mystery they were trying to solve. The next morning, Tom arrived early at the lab. He found Ray already there, all four arms moving quickly as they worked with floating holograms of complex molecular structures. The images spun and twisted in the air, showing patterns that made Tom's head hurt if he looked at them too long. "Good morning," Tom said, setting his tablet down at his workstation. "Can you show me what we're trying to solve?" Ray's metallic skin rippled. A sign Tom was learning meant they were frustrated. "We are attempting to cure the cascade effect," they said, pulling up more holograms. "It is a neural disease that affects multiple species across the galaxy. Watch." The hologram showed a healthy nerve cell. Then it changed, showing the cell twisting and folding in on itself like a piece of paper being crumpled. "This happens in the brains of infected individuals," Ray explained. "The proteins that make up the neural pathways begin folding incorrectly. Our quantum computers have run billions of simulations, but we cannot predict or stop the pattern." Tom watched the simulations several times. Something about the way the cell collapsed reminded him of something, but he couldn't quite place it. "How many species does this affect?" he asked. 27 so far," Professor Blue said, floating into the lab. "And spreading. The disease jumps between species because it affects basic protein structures that most advanced life forms share." The professor's glow was dimmer today, showing concern. "We have 3 months before the next predicted outbreak." Tom stood up and walked around the hologram, studying it from different angles. "Can you show me how you're trying to stop it?" Ray pressed some buttons, and new images appeared. They showed complex energy fields trying to hold the proteins in place, quantum-level manipulations attempting to force the molecules into correct patterns, and computer models predicting thousands of possible solutions. None of them worked. "Your human eyes cannot possibly understand the complexity of these calculations," Ray said, but their voice held more worry than criticism. "We have the most advanced computers in the galaxy working on this problem." Tom nodded slowly. "That's the problem," he said quietly. Both Ray and Professor Blue turned to look at him. "Explain," the professor said. "You're looking too closely," Tom said. He reached up and waved away the detailed molecular views. "Can you show me just the basic folding pattern again? No quantum calculations, no energy fields, just the way it moves." Ray looked confused, but did as Tom asked. The simple hologram of the folding cell appeared again. "I knew this reminded me of something," Tom said, getting excited. "Back on Earth, before we had computers, we had a big problem with ships. Their hulls would sometimes collapse under pressure, folding in on themselves, just like this. We couldn't calculate exactly why it happened, because the math was too complex for us to do by hand." Professor Blue's glow brightened with interest. "How did you solve it?" "We built physical models," Tom said. "Simple ones. We tested them in water tanks and watched how they failed. Sometimes seeing the big picture is more important than understanding every tiny detail." Ray's metallic skin shimmered with doubt. "You suggest we ignore the quantum-level data? That's primitive." "No," Tom said patiently. "I'm suggesting we step back and look at the mechanical problem first. These proteins aren't just quantum particles, they're physical structures. They fold and bend like any other material. Maybe if we understand the physical pattern, it will help us make sense of the quantum data." Professor Blue floated closer to the hologram. "In all our years of study, we never considered such a simple approach. Ray, can you reconfigure the lab's modeling system to show only macro-level physical interactions?" Ray hesitated, then nodded. "It will take time. Our systems are designed for quantum-level analysis. I will have to write new programs." "Do it," Professor Blue ordered. "Sometimes, Tom, the hardest part of solving a problem is remembering to look at it with fresh eyes." The professor turned to leave, then paused. "Even if those eyes belong to a species that hasn't mastered quantum computing." Tom smiled. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As Ray began working on the new programs, Tom pulled out his tablet and started sketching ideas for physical models they could test. Sometimes, the old ways were the best ways, even in the most advanced lab in the galaxy. 3 days later, Tom's workstation looked very different from the others in the lab. While floating holograms and quantum displays filled the rest of the room, his area was covered with physical objects. He had built simple models using the lab's matter printer, creating basic shapes that mimicked the protein structures they were studying. "I still don't understand how playing with toys will help us," Ray said, watching Tom arrange the models on his desk. Their metallic skin flickered with a mix of curiosity and doubt. Tom picked up one of the models, a long chain of connected segments. "These aren't toys. Watch this." He held the chain at one end and let it hang. Then he gently twisted it. The chain suddenly collapsed in on itself, forming a tight spiral. "Look familiar?" Ray's eyes widened. The pattern matched exactly how the neural proteins collapsed in infected patients. "That's remarkable. But it's just a simple physical model. How does this help us understand the quantum interactions?" "Because everything follows basic physical laws," Tom explained, building another model. "Even at the quantum level, things still need to bend and fold in ways that make sense. Your computers are trying to predict every possible quantum state, but maybe we don't need to. Maybe we just need to understand the basic pattern." Professor Blue floated into the lab, followed by several other alien scientists. They had heard about the humans' strange approach and come to see for themselves. Tom felt nervous but continued his demonstration. "In the old days on Earth, we used physical models for everything from DNA to virus structures," he said, setting up more models. "Sometimes seeing how something moves in the real world tells you more than 1,000,000,000 calculations." One of the visiting scientists, a tall creature made of what looked like crystal, stepped forward. "This is absurd. You cannot solve a quantum-level problem with primitive mechanical models." Tom smiled politely. "Ray, can you show them the new scanning results?" Ray nodded and pulled up a hologram. It showed their latest scans of healthy neural tissue alongside infected samples. "We reconfigured our sensors to look at the macro-level structure instead of quantum states. The patterns—" Ray paused, their voice showing excitement. The patterns matched Tom's models perfectly. The crystal scientist made a sound like tinkling bells. "Coincidence. The quantum interactions are what matter." "But what if they're not?" Tom said, standing up. "What if the quantum states are just following the physical folding pattern? Like a river following the path of least resistance." He demonstrated with another model, showing how the structure naturally wanted to fold in specific ways. Professor Blue's glow brightened. "Tom, are you suggesting that the quantum effects are a result of the physical folding, not the cause?" "Exactly," Tom said. "Your computers have been trying to solve the problem from the bottom up, looking at quantum states first. But what if we need to look at it from the top down? Understand the physical pattern, and then use that to predict which quantum states are most likely." The lab grew quiet as everyone watched Tom demonstrate with his models. Even the crystal scientist seemed interested now. "Ray," Professor Blue said after a while, "can you modify our quantum simulations to factor in these physical constraints?" Ray was already working at their station, all 4 arms moving quickly. "Yes. Instead of calculating every possible quantum state, we'll only look at the ones that fit the physical folding patterns. It will reduce our processing needs by a factor of millions." Tom watched as new holograms appeared, showing combined data from both his physical models and the quantum calculations. The patterns were starting to make sense. "Sometimes," Professor Blue said, floating closer to examine the models, "the most advanced solution is not the best solution." "Tom, you've given us a new way to look at an old problem." The crystal scientist made another tinkling sound, but this time it seemed more thoughtful. Perhaps there is something to be learned from simpler methods after all." Tom smiled as he watched Ray input more data. His primitive human approach was starting to change minds. Maybe, just maybe, They were getting closer to solving the puzzle of the cascade effect. The lab hadn't been quiet for days. Word had spread about the humans' unusual approach, and now scientists from other departments kept dropping by to watch. Tom tried to ignore the attention as he and Ray worked on their combined physical quantum model. "Look at this," Ray called out one morning, their metallic skin shining with excitement. "The latest simulation shows something new." They brought up a hologram showing the neural protein structure. "When we apply the physical folding constraints you identified, there's a clear pattern in the quantum states." Tom walked over, studying the floating image. The protein molecules were dancing in a complex but strangely familiar way. "Can you slow it down?" he asked. As the hologram slowed, Tom's eyes widened. "It's like a wave," he said softly. "The folding pattern. It's moving through the neural tissue like a wave through water." Professor Blue floated in, their glow brightening at Tom's words. "Explain," they said. Tom grabbed one of his physical models. "Look, when one protein starts to fold wrong, it creates pressure on the proteins next to it." He demonstrated with the model. The pressure forces those proteins to fold wrong too, like dominoes falling. "But if we can stop the wave, we can stop the disease from spreading." Ray finished, all four arms typing rapidly. "I'm running new simulations now, focusing on breaking the wave pattern." The lab's computers hummed as they processed the new calculations. Other scientists gathered around, watching as the holograms showed different attempts to interrupt the cascading protein fold. "There," Tom pointed at one simulation. "See how that protein cluster resisted the wave. What was different about that one?" Ray zoomed in on the area Tom indicated. That section had a different physical structure. The proteins were arranged in a hexagonal pattern instead of the usual square grid. "Can we use that?" Professor Blue asked, floating closer to the display. "Maybe," Tom said, already building a new physical model. "If we could find a way to change the protein structure before the wave hits, we could create a fire break," Ray said excitedly. "Like stopping a forest fire by clearing trees in its path." Tom smiled at the analogy. Even alien scientists used simple comparisons sometimes. "Exactly. But we need to find a way to change the protein structure without damaging the neural tissue." Professor Blue's glow pulsed thoughtfully. "The quantum reconstructor might work. Instead of trying to force the proteins to maintain their original shape, we could preemptively change their physical arrangement to resist the cascade effect." Ray was already modifying the simulation. The hologram showed healthy neural tissue being altered into the hexagonal pattern, then exposed to the cascade effect. The wave of incorrect folding hit the modified section and stopped. The lab erupted in excited chatter. Scientists who had been skeptical of Tom's physical modeling approach were now crowding around Ray's workstation, pointing at different parts of the simulation and discussing possibilities. "It works in the simulation," Tom said cautiously. "But will it work in real tissue?" Professor Blue turned to the gathered scientists. "Prepare the quantum reconstructor. We'll test it on a small tissue sample first." As the others rushed to set up the equipment, Ray turned to Tom. "You know," they said, their metallic skin rippling with what Tom had learned was amusement. "When you first arrived, I thought having a human in the lab would slow us down." Tom grinned. "And now?" "Now I think perhaps we have been moving too fast," Ray said, "always rushing to use the most advanced solution, when sometimes the answer is simpler." Professor Blue floated back to them. "The test sample is ready. Would you like to do the honors, Tom? After all, this breakthrough wouldn't have been possible without your, what did you call it? Human touch." Tom walked over to the quantum reconstructor, its sleek alien design a stark contrast to his simple physical models still scattered across his workstation. As he prepared to start the test, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best way forward was to take a step back and look at things differently. That was something humans had always been good at. The news of the breakthrough spread through the Galactic Science Academy like wildfire. Initial tests on tissue samples showed promising results, but not everyone was convinced. That's why Tom wasn't surprised when Professor Blue called him and Ray to an emergency meeting in the main lecture hall. The Academy Board has received a formal challenge, Professor Blue said, their glow dimmed with concern. Dr. Stone from the Advanced Quantum Research Division claims our methods are unreliable. Tom looked around the huge lecture hall. Hundreds of alien scientists had gathered to watch. In the front row sat Dr. Stone, a crystalline being whose sharp edges seemed to radiate disapproval. "This is a waste of the Academy's time," Dr. Stone said, their voice ringing like chimes. "Using physical models to solve quantum problems. It goes against everything we know about advanced research methods." Ray stepped forward, their metallic skin shimmering with anger. "The results speak for themselves. The treatment works. On test samples," Dr. Stone countered, "under controlled conditions, but you cannot seriously expect us to approve a treatment based on a human's primitive understanding of physics." The room filled with murmurs. Tom felt all eyes turned to him. He took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room. "You're right," he said, causing everyone to fall silent. "I don't fully understand quantum physics. I probably never will. But I do understand patterns. And sometimes, the simplest pattern tells you everything you need to know." Tom pulled out one of his physical models. "Dr. Stone, would you please come here?" The crystalline scientist hesitated, then moved forward. Tom handed them the model. "Please, hold it like this," Tom demonstrated. "Now, apply pressure to both ends." Dr. Stone did as asked. The model suddenly collapsed in a specific pattern, exactly like the neural proteins affected by the cascade effect. "Now," Tom said, "can you tell me why it folded that way, without using quantum calculations?" "Of course not," Dr. Stone chimed irritably. "The quantum interactions." "But it did fold," Tom interrupted gently. "Every time, in exactly the same way. Just like the neural proteins, we didn't need to understand every quantum interaction to see the pattern. Sometimes the answer is simple, even if the science behind it is complex." Professor Blue floated forward. "We have prepared a demonstration." Ray activated the main hologram display. It showed a live feed of an infected tissue sample. "This sample is actively experiencing the cascade effect," they explained. "Watch what happens when we apply our treatment." The quantum reconstructor hummed to life. Everyone watched as the tissue's protein structure changed into the hexagonal pattern Tom had discovered. When the cascading wave of protein folding hit the modified section, it stopped. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Dr. Stone stared at the display, their crystalline surface reflecting the successful results. But this goes against established research methods," they protested, though their voice held less certainty now. "Sometimes," Tom said, picking up another model, "we need to step back to move forward. The quantum calculations are still important. We couldn't have developed the treatment without them. But understanding the physical pattern was the key that made everything else work." Professor Blue's glow brightened. "The question before the Academy Board is simple. Do we reject a working solution because it came from an unexpected source? Or do we acknowledge that different perspectives, even seemingly primitive ones, can lead to breakthroughs?" The room fell silent as the board members looked at each other. Finally, the head of the board, a being made of swirling gas, moved forward. "Dr. Stone," they said, their voice echoing, "your concerns about proper scientific method are noted. However, we cannot ignore results." They turned to Tom. "Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from seeing old problems in new ways. The board approves continued development of the treatment." Tom felt Ray's hand on his shoulder. They had won the challenge. But more importantly, they had shown that sometimes the best solution was the simplest one. As the room filled with excited discussion, Tom couldn't help but smile. Human ingenuity had proven its worth in the most advanced laboratory in the galaxy. 2 weeks after the challenge, the treatment had been successfully tested on all 27 affected species. Tom sat in Professor Blue's office, surrounded by holograms showing recovery data from across the galaxy. "The results are beyond our expectations," Professor Blue said, their glow pulsing with joy. "The modified neural tissue not only stops the cascade effect, but seems to prevent it from returning. You've helped save millions of lives, Tom." "We all did it together," Tom said modestly. "My physical models wouldn't have helped without Ray's quantum calculations and your reconstructor technology." The door chimed, and Ray entered, all four arms carrying data tablets. "The medical council just approved the treatment for general use," they announced, their metallic skin gleaming with excitement. "It's already being distributed to hospitals in 12 galaxies." "That's not all," Professor Blue said, floating to the center of the room. "The Academy Board has made a decision. They want to create a new department focusing on what they're calling integrated problem solving. It will combine traditional physical modeling with advanced quantum computing." Tom looked up in surprise. "A new department?" "Yes." Professor Blue's glow brightened, "and they want you to help design the curriculum. Your approach to the cascade effect has made many scientists rethink their methods. Even Dr. Stone has requested to join the research team." Ray set down their tablets. "Other human universities are already sending applications for their students to join the exchange program. Your success has opened many doors." Tom felt overwhelmed. When he'd first arrived at the academy, he'd just hoped to prove that humans had something to offer. He never expected to help start a whole new field of study. "There's more," Professor Blue continued. "The Galactic Science Council is meeting tomorrow. They wish to recognize your contribution officially." The council. Tom's eyes widened. He'd read about them, the highest scientific body in known space. "But I'm just a student." "A student who helped solve one of the biggest medical challenges in the galaxy," Ray corrected, "using methods that most of us had dismissed as primitive." Professor Blue floated to the window, looking out at the crystal towers of the academy stretching into the purple sky. "You know, Tom, when you first arrived, many thought accepting a human student was a mistake. Your species is so young, your technology so basic compared to ours." "I remembered," Tom said with a small smile, thinking of those first difficult days. "But you showed us something valuable," Professor Blue continued. "You showed us that advancement doesn't always mean complexity. Sometimes the best solutions come from seeing things simply, from understanding basic patterns that transcend technology levels." Ray moved to stand beside Tom. "The Academy is already implementing your methods in other research areas. The engineering department used physical modeling to solve a problem with starship hull design that had stumped their quantum simulations for years. And the biology department is using similar approaches to understand viral mutations," Professor Blue added. "Your human touch has started a minor revolution in our research methods." Tom looked at the holograms still floating around them, showing recovered patients from dozens of worlds. "I just tried to help," he said quietly, "like any scientist would." "No," Professor Blue's glow pulsed warmly. "You did more than that. You reminded us that progress isn't just about having the most advanced technology. It's about looking at problems from every angle, including the simple ones we sometimes forget to consider." Ray's metallic skin rippled with amusement. "And now the most advanced scientific institution in the galaxy is eagerly accepting human students. Who would have thought?" Tom smiled as he watched more recovery data stream in from distant hospitals. He had come to learn from the aliens' advanced science, but in the end, he had taught them something too. Sometimes the best way forward was to take a step back and see things through new eyes, even if those eyes belonged to a species that hadn't yet mastered interstellar travel. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Science Academy had never been so crowded. Beings from hundreds of worlds filled the massive crystal chamber, their varied forms creating a living rainbow of colors, textures, and light. Tom stood backstage, adjusting his formal environmental suit and trying to calm his nerves. "Ready?" Ray asked, their metallic skin gleaming under the ceremonial lights. "The entire galaxy is watching, you know. No pressure." Tom laughed nervously. "Thanks for the reminder. Are all award ceremonies this big?" Only when someone revolutionizes galactic research methods, Professor Blue said, floating up to join them. Their glow was at its brightest today. The Galactic Innovation Medal hasn't been awarded to a student in over 3 centuries, and never to a human. Before Tom could respond, the ceremony began. The head of the Academy Board, the gaseous being who had supported them during the challenge, floated to the central platform. Today, we celebrate not just a scientific breakthrough. Their voice echoed through the hall, but a reminder that innovation comes in many forms. Our recipient showed us that sometimes the greatest advances come not from having the most advanced technology, but from seeing problems in new ways. Tom walked onto the stage as his name was called. The crowd of alien scientists, many of whom had doubted him months ago, now filled the hall with their various forms of applause. The cascade effect threatened countless lives across 27 species, the head continued. Our most advanced computers couldn't solve it, but a human student, using what we thought were primitive methods, showed us the way. Tom Reed reminded us that true science isn't about the tools we use, but about how we think. Dr. Stone floated forward, their crystalline form catching the light. In their hands they held the Galactic Innovation Medal, a device that seemed to contain a small galaxy of stars. I was wrong, Dr. Stone said, their chimes ringing clear. I thought advanced science could only come from advanced technology. You proved that the best solutions sometimes come from the simplest understanding. As the medal was placed around his neck, Tom felt its warm glow sync with his heartbeat. The tiny stars within it danced in patterns that reminded him of his first physical models of the protein structures. Thank you, Tom said, his voice carrying through the hall. But this award belongs to everyone who was willing to try something different. To Ray, who helped combine simple physical models with quantum calculations. To Professor Blue, who gave a human student a chance. And to the Academy, for being willing to learn from what you once thought primitive. He touched the medal gently. On Earth, we have a saying. Sometimes you have to look back to move forward. That's what we did. We looked back at simple physical models to solve a complex quantum problem. And in doing so, we moved all of science forward. The hall erupted in another wave of alien applause. But Tom wasn't finished. That's why I'm honored to announce that I'm accepting the Academy's offer to teach here, he continued. The new Department of Integrated Problem Solving will welcome students from all species, including more humans. Together, we'll explore how combining different approaches, from the simplest to the most advanced, can help us solve the galaxy's challenges. Ray stepped forward, holding up a data tablet. We already have over 1,000 applications from across the galaxy, they announced, including 50 human students. Professor Blue's glow pulsed with pride. And so a new era begins, one where we recognize that every species, no matter their technological level, has something valuable to teach us. As Tom looked out over the crowd, he saw humans scattered among the alien scientists, new exchange students already arriving to study at the Academy. Each one carried the same look of wonder he had worn when he first arrived. But now they wouldn't have to prove themselves like he did. They were already welcome. The medal glowed warmly against his chest, its tiny galaxy of stars dancing in endless patterns. Tom smiled, thinking about all the future discoveries waiting to be made, not just with advanced technology, but with the simple human touch that had earned him his surprising reward.